So people are saying d5 is main. I'm not sure. After d5, who thinks they know how black's supposed to organize their pieces at this point? Yeah, so people are all saying knight b7 to d6, but we have an important distinction to make. Do we play knight b7, knight d6 directly, or do we first play c4? Yeah, everyone's getting this right. Everyone's saying first c4. Would anybody like to explain why we first play c4? Anybody want to explain? You can. I guess I can call on you if you give me an exclamation point. Okay, so let me call on Aradia. Let's see.
Yeah, my reason was to like stop black from playing c4 because
it's black to move here. We're asking should black play c4, but I guess it sounds like you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to start with c4 before playing knight b7 to d6, because if you play knight b7 to d6 directly, white is able to play c4, and the problem is because he's played this move, he's controlling the square, and he has this plan of playing a4, a5 to break open the queen side and cause you some trouble. While if you start with c4 directly, after something like bishop c2 and knight b7. Now, once this knight lands on d6, white does not have a great way to open the queen side because he will not be able to fix the b6 pawn in place, and he'll always be ready to meet a5 with b5. So as a result here, after knight d6, black has blockaded things nicely and can look for f5 in the future. And I think he's basically fine. So that's one line. I think what people were mostly doing was this one, and there was this funky idea, I think, that after bc, bishop takes c5, I believe you're supposed to actually play this weird move, bishop h6. And long story short, I think black is basically fine. But I had come up with an interesting idea for this game. I actually prepared it for Safarli for the World Cup 2019, but I didn't get a chance to use it, which is to play the move d takes e5. And this move just hangs all the rules strategically. It gives black like this very nice pawn chain that controls a lot of key squares. We have weaknesses on the queen side. We're giving him the c4 square. But basically, when you play this Grunfeld with bishop c4, knight e2, your plan, I think, should just be to hang the rules and to start attacking black's king. And I was sort of ready to do that, and I started throwing pieces in his general direction. So there followed knight g3, and after some thought, Niels played bishop g4. Okay, so we have an interesting position here. First question. Obviously, we don't want our queen to get taken, but I think there's a pretty specific way white should be playing this position. What should he be playing and why? So Austin, you want to share what you have to say there?
I thought that if you take the bishop on g4 and black plays queen d3, then suddenly you have a lot of weak squares. The e3 bishop's under attack, the c3 pawn is hanging. The queen is just a huge pain to deal with on d3. And so I think it's less about losing the bishop and more about giving up that square. You just don't want black to be able to penetrate.
Additionally, black's ready for knight c4. So you said you don't want to play this way?
Yeah, you don't want to play this way. I suggested queen c2 instead.
Okay. So the question is, what if I play c4? Then we're going to trade the bishops and my queen is going to land on d3 anyway.
Yeah, but then you can play rook d1 and then the queen has to...
So how would your variation go?
Bishop e2, queen takes e2, queen d3, and then rook fd1.
Nah, but black is, I think, very comfortable here. He can play like rook fe8, for example, e5, f6, and he's doing quite fine. So I don't think this is great. Andy, what are you saying? Yeah, so Andy, you want to share with us what you have in mind? All right, let me invite you to talk.
I thought queen f2 because the c3 pawn can't be taken because of rook fd1, and then he has to move his queen back probably to like d7.
Yeah, I prefer queen f3. It feels more natural, but yeah. The big point here is that it's not that if we were to compare this position to, like, for example, let's suppose white were to play queen takes g4, queen d3, and then queen f3 with the same idea that if bishop c3 ready with rook fd1. The big difference is that by playing queen c2, we had provoked black to play the move c4. And now that black's pawn is back on c5, he has this move knight c4 available, which completely ruins our day. So as a result, black is doing very well here. But if we play queen c2 instead, if black is this desperate to get the queen to d3, his big problem is that without the move knight c4, this just doesn't help him. We're ready for rook fd1 next, expelling this queen, and then at some point we're going to start even. I mean, if he has to play at queen d7 anyway, I'm not even sure I want to burn time on rook d1. I might just want to go e5, stick a bishop on d4, play f5, and start to give mate. So I think it makes a lot of sense that we're not so much scared of the queen landing on d3 once this pawn has been provoked to the c4 square, if that makes sense to people. All right, Niels played queen d7, which is not a bad move, but also not a remotely subtle one. What does the guy want to play next? So Zoe is saying rook a d8. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Black would very much like to attack this bishop and provoke you into playing a move like bishop e2 at a moment when after black lands his queen on d3 he will have knight c4 next. He wants to trade these bishops without playing c4 himself. And playing rook d8 to attack this bishop who doesn't have a great place to go seems like a very fruitful way to make that happen. So what can white do as prophylaxis against rook d8? Yeah. People are finding this, rook f2, this is not rocket science, that's good. So here I was still in preparation, and my preparation, if I recall, had gone after rook a d8, white goes bishop f1, and I'm trying to remember exactly what I had here. I think I gave some kind of bishop d1 to a4, but ultimately concluded that white should be better with some kind of attacking chances after f5 later on. But that was something that I was thinking about, or that I had prepared. And I knew that the computer gave this move rook a d8, and after bishop f1, I thought white was supposed to be a little bit better. Instead, Niels played rook f d8. And obviously, this is a very similar move to rook a d8, but it's worth some extra thought. And here, actually, I didn't think critically enough, and I screwed up. So what we need to do is find a better move than what I played, and hopefully you guys can figure out what white should do and why. Obviously, we only have so many candidate moves because the bishop on d3 is hanging. But try to see if you can see if there's any difference between this position and the one where black plays rook a d8. Guys, let's try to stay focused, please. So Austin says, does the rook not defending f7 matter? I don't think that is the big idea. There's actually more than one difference here. There's one way where the move rook f d8 instead of rook a d8 is very helpful for black, and there's another where it's very, very much not helpful. So Sinak is saying that after rook a d8, the rook, if black were to set up with rook a d8 and rook f e8, the rook will be more useful on e8 than a8, or if black were to if you think about this rook, where is it best? These moves don't do anything. What you would really like is to bring the rook here. And in that regard, it would have been much better to play rook a d8 instead of rook f d8. So strategically, I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. Rook f d8 is an inferior move. He should have played rook a d8 if all we're thinking about is strategy. But there's also some dynamics at play that I think we have to consider. And there's a reason that rook f d8, there's a very real and tangible reason that rook f d8 has some merit to it. I don't think that's right, Sunak. First of all, let's think. Our bishop is hanging. We have to figure out where it's going. Or, well, I mean, we only really have two moves we can consider. We can go bishop f1 or rook d2. Those are the only serious moves we have at our disposal. Bishop a6 will get hit with b5. So we can only really consider bishop f1 or rook d2. Start by thinking about bishop f1. We know that was the best move if black had played rook a d8. I'm just going to tell you that because I'll pretend you guys had my preparation during the game. I mean, during the game, I knew that after rook a d8, bishop f1 is the best move. If we play bishop f1 now, is there any difference? How's black going to respond to bishop f1? Alice is saying bishop d1. I don't think so. There's a much better move than that. Lyndon, I don't love that either. At some point, white's going to start attacking you. All right. Is polling available or no? It doesn't look like it. So Andy's saying c4. I don't think black wants to play c4. This will freeze his knight on a5 and deny it its best option. So bishop f1, c4 should not scare white in the slightest. Okay, Lyndon, you have a good point. You want to talk with us about that? All right, so let me ask you to unmute.
So after bishop f1, black will play bishop e6, and the idea is to put a piece, either the bishop or the knight, on c4.
Yeah, abuse the weakened c4 square. Why is it different now than it would be with the rook on f8?
I
mean, this is right, but
I do not actually know.
Yeah, so Rio's got this. Rio, you want to share with us? You're on a train? Okay. Yeah. Timothy, you want to share with us? I'll take that as a yes. Let's see.
So like what? Well, I can play f5.
Mm-hmm.
So after bishop there, then because of like f6, and then the bishop can go to f8.
Yes. If black had played the other rook to d8, if we go rook a d8 here, then this bishop e6 move falls on its face. You end up with a buried bishop in the corner, and you're basically going to play a piece down, and here you're completely lost. But because black has played rook f d8 instead, now after bishop f1, black is able to play bishop e6 much more comfortably because he's not particularly concerned about this position. So that was his big point, and to be honest, I just totally missed it and walked straight into it. What I could have done is play rook d2, realizing the position had changed. And there's a variation now, I think, that goes like queen e7, e5, and f6, and say we go something like rook e1. This is exactly the kind of position where black really wishes he had a rook on f8. Where like if he could play f takes e5 and I go f5, I think if he had a rook on f8, he might be just okay. But here I think he's probably just going to get himself checkmated. That seems pretty straightforward. So this I think would have been a better way. It's not like black's dead here, but it's a pretty dangerous position. So returning to how the game went, after rook f d8, I walked right into it with bishop f1, which was less than brilliant. And here I sort of was regretting my decision making. And already I think black has a totally fine position, but still I managed to find the best way to put him under pressure and make tough decisions. So what should white play now and why? Rio, I think that's a little bit too optimistic. Keep in mind here, strategically, we're in massive trouble. Okay, so James, you have a good idea. You want to share with us? All right. Oh, sorry, hang on. My bad, guys. Here, let me scroll up to James. Next on mute.
Yeah, so I thought bishop g5 is kind of unpleasant because like the rook doesn't really have a place, like it would want to stay on the d file. So I was thinking bishop g5. And then like you don't really want to go f6 because you're just like blocking your bishop. And then you go like rook d2, like rook e8 probably.
Yeah, so you're forcing black to make an unpleasant decision. He's going to have to either play f6, which both blunts his bishop and compromises his king side, or he's going to have to completely surrender the d file and let you put both rooks on it while he doesn't get any. Neither of these is something that he's wildly thrilled about. So this, I think, is quite a good move as a result. Instead, black played f6, which was the best decision. Bishop back to f4. Now bishop d3. I think black could have improved here with g5. I think that would have given him an okay position. But instead he played bishop d3, which is a very tempting move, but it's also a serious mistake. What can white do to cause trouble now? Yeah, and I could be a little careful there. Andy, I don't think that helps you. You don't want to let black get knight c4 with king of tempo. There's some actual calculation to be done here for what it's worth. Like, there's real variations you need to be considering. But Andy, I don't think that's great. For what it's worth, let me put it this way. I believe black's next move is going to be g5, and then your bishop is going to be in very serious danger when knight c4 comes. Let's start with that and think about that consequence for a second. So you have to be ready for that, no matter what you do with your queen. So to Sunak, I don't think that's great. Black will go g5 at the end. And your bishop's in trouble. So Andy, that's getting closer, but still not amazing, I don't think. Austin, the problem with queen d2 is you really don't want to trade queens here because, like, your whole goal is basically to just sort of smash through with e5 and blow up the king, and without queens, it's not going to happen. So, first of all, after queen d2, you're already sort of begging for knight c4, but I think more to the point, black can just take on f1, and then he's very happy to get the queens off the board and land a knight on c4. So I don't think queen d2 is great. Rio, bishop takes d3, and queen a4 does not threaten rook g1. Yeah, like a couple of people have given me this line here, but I think after g5 you're sort of out of steam. The bishop has to go somewhere ugly. If you play rook d2, there is queen c4. Yeah, I don't think that's great. A couple people have given me this line: queen d1 takes and rook d2, but the bishop can come back to d3, so we can't do that. Let's see. Rohan, you want to share with us? It looks like.
Okay, so here I played queen d1. And here if black plays bishop takes f1, then instead of playing rook d2 or like queen takes f1, I played rook takes f1 here because we don't want to give up the open d file.
But I think black is very happy to get the queens off the board. And he should go knight c4 next and be basically fine. Now, I think here after queen takes f1, white's just better. That's how the game went. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I just think it's actually a pretty clean and easy advantage. And we'll get to that later. But the real question is, what if black plays g5 here, which is a very critical move and one you want to make sure that you're ready for. And white has an important resource here, without which I don't think he would have anything particularly special. Andy says rook d2, but I don't think it's very scary. Let's calculate actual variations, guys. You want to be precise here. Okay, a lot of people are giving me bishop takes g5, which I had not actually seriously considered, but let me think. It's an interesting move at another juncture. I'm not sure if it's great here. So people are saying after bishop g5, they're going take f6 with the idea of bishop f8, queen h5. Seems very dangerous for black. Wondering if he can do anything else there. Yeah, this might be decent as well, but there's something much stronger. Like for example, if black wants to go into like turtle mode, he can play something like this, and now sorry, queen d3, and it's probably not that bad for him. He will lose his piece back, of course, but with equal material, it doesn't seem so terrible. So, and perhaps bishop f8 is working, but there's just a much better move here. White, you can just calculate this out to 1-0, basically. It's actually pretty straightforward. Full variation, though. Lyndon, that's close. But after knight h5, black can start with bishop f1, I think. which might ruin your day. Be careful here, guys. Okay, Andy, you want to share with us? That's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, people are now getting this. Okay, Andy, London, and Austin all got it. All right, so let me call on Andy. He got it first.
So I thought bishop takes d3.
Yeah, so this is the best move. If queen d3, then rook d2 wins directly, but what if gf4?
Then knight h5, because if queen d3, then queen g4, he has to go rook d7, and then knight f6, I thought.
Yeah, and then we take this, and now after queen takes d7, queen takes f4, black is not in time to blockade these pawns. We're gonna get e5 and f6, and that should be the end of that. But black doesn't really have a choice, because if he doesn't take d3, if we're allowed to just take this pawn and stick the knight on d5, we're pretty clearly gonna win the game. We'll be a clean pawn up, no counterplay whatsoever, and black's king will be missing pawn cover. So it's not like black really has a ton of options here. So this, I think, is probably what black missed. In the game there followed, bishop takes f1, queen f1. And here, I could have played this move bishop g5, which would have transposed to some variation we had just discussed. And here, I think black is basically okay after taking knight c4. He's ready for queen e3 next to try to get the queens off the board. And it's a little scary for him, but I don't think he's in terrible shape. And this was definitely playable, but I think what I found was a bit stronger. So I started with the move rook d2, which is natural enough to go attack this queen. And I was expecting queen b5. In the game, he played queen c4. And here there's actually two ways to a big advantage. I saw the second best one. The better one was the one the computer found. But let's see if you guys can figure out a good way for white to proceed. Sinak, I'm not sure I understand your variation. We need like an actual line here, not just a move. Yeah, Andy, I think that's a bit too rash. We're not able to just sacrifice and break through here. At this point, the d-file is the most important thing. And if you can successfully take the d-file, you should be in good shape. A lot of people are giving me bishop c7, but they're not realizing that they're just trapping their own bishop. Like rook d7 or rook c8 seem like a problem. Bishop d6, there's knight c4. Okay, so Austin has a good move. You want to share with us, Austin? Okay, so where are you? There you are.
We can actually just play a very direct rook cd1.
Yeah,
obviously rook is under attack.
Yeah, because after taking queen takes d2, he still cannot take the bishop. So at this point, we've taken the d-file, and I'm very seriously considering just chopping on g5 next move after black stops it somehow. This should be nice for white, but I don't know. I mean, maybe black can keep fighting after queen c6 or something. But this was my plan during the game, to take the d-file like this. The computer found something even stronger, which is to play bishop c7. But after rook d7, you have to see this lovely move, or else it doesn't work. So I don't think anybody had seen that in advance, so I'm not going to give anybody credit for finding bishop c7. Because without this move, I think you're in big trouble, but with it, you're basically winning. But Niels surprised me with the move queen c4. At first, I thought this was just dumb because I'll be able to play bishop d6 without knight c4 coming. But then I realized here that things were not as easy as they seem. So I don't really have that much choice in the matter. Sorry, Andy is saying, can you go rook d7 first? Rook d7 1, Andy. So this was right here. This one, rook d7 now. You want which move? Queen d1 and then what? Oh, you want to take on d7 directly and then play queen d1 next? You could do this, but I think it's much more convincing to play queen d1 first, because we're not really thrilled about the queens coming off the board. I mean, here it's a pretty good version because we're slamming in with rook d7 and knight h5, but still, I'd rather keep the queens on. Because black's king is sort of open, and I think queen d1 just feels like a better option to me. So anyhow, instead Niels played the move queen c4. So there's not too much choice in the matter. I mean, if I play bishop e3, that's just a very sad move, and I'm not really going to think I'm going to put that much pressure. So I took some time, but eventually decided I had to pull the trigger on this one. And of course, then queen f7 came with knight c4 on the way. And here white has a very important idea that I think Niels underestimated a bit. Let's see if you guys can figure out what white should play here and why. And you really need to see like a couple moves ahead and some follow-ups and key concepts, because it's not easy to consolidate this position. Rio, that's not a very long variation. I think you need to expand a bit. Lyndon, that's not great. Black's first move in the line is really bad, and your second move is also not good after it. So Sunak, you've missed something, but you want to share your line? All right, so Sunak, let's hear from you.
I wanted to play rook cd1, and then if you play knight c4, then rook d5 exchange.
You've bolstered the bishop pretty well, right?
Yeah.
And you were saying that if we take all this stuff and black takes a2, that you're going to go mate him with e5?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe you. I think this is mate. But the problem is I think your rook's going to get perpetualed. So I believe this is a draw on the spot with knight b2 to c4 back and forth. You'll not be able to save this bishop without losing some material, and I think we're just going to repeat moves. So at this point, it was pretty easy for me to play bishop d6 because I understood in the worst case scenario I can just make a draw with rook d2 and rook d1 like this, but white has a better option. So let's see if we can find the way to break through and prove an advantage. And the first move is relatively thematic, but you really need to be calculating it correctly and seeing a lot of key ideas. Okay, so Andy, one of your lines is right and the other is wrong, so let's take a look.
So I thought e5.
Okay, so first thing is, what if knight c4?
Then e6. He has to play queen e8.
Sure, queen b7 is similar, but okay, queen e8.
e7.
Yeah, so e7 is good enough here, but I also don't even think you need to do anything. If you just go rook d1, despite the extra exchange, black is completely busted. He's got absolutely no counterplay, and we're going to go knight e4 and then just like h4, for example, should be good enough. And it's a completely different scenario when this pawn is on e6 compared to e4. If the pawn were back here, black would go like rook d7, rook d8, and then you'd lose. But here with the pawn on e6, obviously that's a different scenario. Yeah. But Andy, what were you going to do if the event of f takes e5, which is a much better move?
I was going to go knight e4.
Okay, but can I not take this one?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That's a pretty... Now I'm sort of 2 pawns up and your bishop is getting trapped. But yeah, James, you want to share with us? You had a good idea?
I thought you just bolster the pawn with like queen e4, and now you're ready to go like.
And after knight c4?
I mean, you could go. Does rook d1 work here?
Which one?
Like rook cd1.
Take this one. I'm not thrilled with it. Bishop f8 comes next.
Bishop f8, yeah.
Yeah, so Lyndon has it right though. Lyndon, you want to share?
You play rook d5. The point is black can't take on d6 because after rook d6, a8 hangs.
Yeah. However, this is very much not the end of the story. There's a lot of fun variations here. So what Niels had told me after the game was he had seen this and was planning them with bishop f8. But what I had seen, then eventually he saw as well because he changed his mind. Sunak is saying, what about knight e3? But I think I can move my rook back here, for example. Or, yeah, and then knight c4 back. But now you're not actually threatening anything, right? No threats? So what if I go queen f3 and get ready for knight e4 next? I could maybe throw f6 at you too, I'm not sure, but f6 actually looks really tempting. But yeah, so here, Niels had told me after the game that he had seen this far and was planning bishop f8. And then eventually he changed his mind because he saw the variation that I had in mind. But there follows queen c4, rook d6, rook d1, rook d8. I think black can't get away with taking the queen. I suspect he will just get himself mated once my rook gets to d7. But Niels was saying, okay, we'll get this far, we get this endgame. And he's like, yeah, okay, you know, white gets a little blockade, but I'm a pawn up. And it only occurred to him later that, funnily enough, despite the pawn down, white is completely winning. It's not even remotely close. I've just stopped all the counterplay. I can go a4, g4, bring the king up, knight here, king over to d5, knight back to e4. There's just nothing to be done for black. Zero counterplay, and funnily enough, despite the pawn up, he's completely lost. So this is what Niels said he had missed, was he just sort of forgot that despite the pawn up, he's in big trouble there. So after rook d5, what he came up with was this move b5, which makes some sense. He's trying to protect this knight. And here I was very happy with what I came up with next, because it's not easy for white to untangle this position. Because, for example, now after b5, now bishop f8 is an honest-to-goodness threat, because we don't have queen takes c4 anymore. For example, if f6, bishop f8 comes, and then we can kind of resign, I think. But we have to be very careful here. But there is a way for white to show a big advantage that I was very happy with myself for finding. Hang on, f6, there's also just take on f6 or something. Yeah, f6, queen takes f6 looks pretty annoying, actually. Then he's threatening knight d6 as well. So we need an important resource here. And we'll have to see more than one move ahead. A lot of people are ignoring this bishop f8 threat, which I'm kind of surprised by. Okay, a lot of people are giving me rook cd1, but how's black going to respond to rook cd1? What's always been his trick whenever you do that? It's always going to be knight b2. So you have, I mean, I'm not saying rook cd1 is wrong, but you have to, like, if you're going to play rook cd1, you shouldn't be thinking, oh, rook cd1, queen f6. No, he's going to play knight b2. And that's the move you have to be ready for. Troy, very nice. You want to share with us? All right, so Troy, you got a good variation. Do you want to share it with us or no? Okay. So a couple of people are giving me this line rook cd1 and then rook back to b1, and then after knight c4, rook takes b5, basically black resigns, which is fine. But what's he going to play in this position? Yeah, people are seeing this. Knight a4 is an exceptionally annoying move, and it's not an easy one to deal with. I was calculating this line, and I was thinking about playing rook d3 to protect this pawn and get my rook off of the hanging square, but what's black going to play now? Queen a2, I don't think that's great. c4 isn't great either, then there's rook f3. And nobody wants black's move here, actually. Or no one has seen it yet. Yeah, Andy's got this. Queen c4. And kick this queen out of the way. And at this point, white is a pawn down. Like, endgames are not going to be wildly promising for him. And here, this is not so clean. The queen doesn't have a great place to go, and I think black is basically fine. But so we can do a little comparison, though, and figure out a better way than that for white to proceed. So what we're going to do. So a couple of people have already found this, but no one wants to share with me. Okay, Troy, let's call on you then.
So the idea is that we want to move our rook on the 5th rank to d1.
Oh, rook, you wanted rook 5 d1.
Yeah, well, not sure actually, because I thought that like knight b2, rook f1, but I'm not sure how it works out.
Yeah, this doesn't feel great. I thought you meant the other rook. But
I mean, we could use rook cd1, knight
this is
b2.
one. Yeah. And now instead of rook b1, when knight a4 is annoying, we have this move rook f1, which is very powerful because we've distracted black's knight from the c4 square, so we're no longer worried about our bishop hanging. And so for one critical moment, for example, if black were to play bishop f8, we're ready with f6, and we're not worried about the bishop hanging, and we're ready for knight f5 next, and this game is over. But a key point as well is that if black were to play knight a4, trying to cause trouble this way, now after rook d3 and queen c4, we saw this position a second ago with white's rook on b1, and I don't think it was wildly convincing then, but here after f6, it's all gone. And that's the point of bringing the rook to f1 instead of b1. So we first distract the knight, and then we're going to and then we go for rook f1 next. So the game did continue knight b2, rook f1, and here so Niels played bishop f6, which I think is necessary. Like if he plays knight c4 after f6, I think he's basically just crushed here. Way too many threats, and the position is falling apart. So that would be bad news for black. And after rook d1, he played bishop f6 instead. And here, actually, I made a mistake, but it wasn't one that I believe is particularly human to punish. Let's see if you guys can find the best move. My guess is most of you will end up playing the same move I did, but we'll see. And no, guys, you don't get to say or. You must choose which move you want to make. You don't get to make two moves at once. And keep in mind, like, you know, black is a strong grandmaster. He's not just blundering stuff off the board. He has ideas in mind, and you should be ready for them. And give me like an actual variation, not just a move. Austin, bishop e5, can't you take with the queen on d5 then? That doesn't look good. Also at the end of your line, there's knight c4 and black is getting like good counterplay. You don't want that. Yes, Sunak, that is what I played, and black has some pretty ridiculous defense after that, but it's very, very hard. Oh, there is a better move. All right. A lot of people are giving me rook takes c5. Do we think black's going to resign, or does he have a trick that we should be paying attention to? After rook takes c5, black has a move that you want to make sure you're ready for. Yeah, and people are noticing. Rook c5, there's going to be knight c4, and knight d2 is threatened, and knight d6 is threatened, and your bishop is almost trapped. Like, If you're gonna play rook c5, you want to make sure you have the position under control. It's what I played, and it turns out black is actually fine, but but you want to see at least one more move ahead after knight c4. A lot of people are giving me rook e5. I think this is unnecessary and too optimistic. After rook e5, just bishop e5 and knight c4 and knight d2 is coming. It's not like black is... Whenever you're evaluating any exchange sacrifice, the first question you should always ask yourself is how good are the rooks? And here the answer is they're going to be pretty good. All right, Andy, that's a pretty good line. You want to share with us? Yeah, but Lyndon had a better one. So we'll start with Andy.
I thought rook c5, knight c4, and then rook d1.
Okay, and did you have an idea of what black might play next?
Bishop e7.
And how did you want to play after that?
I thought rook c7.
And then what did you expect?
Maybe like knight d6.
And then what?
Rook d6.
And then white wins, yeah?
Yeah.
What if he plays bishop d6 instead of knight d6? Did you see this?
No.
Bishop c5 check is coming. That's
Yeah.
scary. We'll get back to that. But in the meantime, I think Lyndon had an even stronger move than rook c5. Lyndon, you want to share with us?
So my move is queen f3, and the point is after something like knight c4, white plays knight e4, and the rook on d5 is no longer hanging because f6 falls, and the bishop on d6 is also protected, and white's plan is something like, I don't know, maybe rook fd1 or something.
Next move is maybe rook c5, I would think.
Okay, yeah.
Seems easy enough. Yeah, this is completely winning. This was the way to go. So I played rook takes c5, knight c4, and rook d1, the same as several of you wanted. And here, by some absolute freak of nature, this move saves black. It's hard to understand, but there's a few points. One is just simply it stops rook takes b5. Another is queen a7 is in the air. Another is he's ready to now play rook a7, because if he can't, like, the big problem is this bishop is pinned, but in order for it to get attacked further, this rook has to move, and it doesn't really have a square to go to. So a6 gives it a square. Black is preparing for this one. He can potentially play queen a7 next for tactical problems. And here, I think the computer said I have to give an exchange with rook takes c4, which is not so bad for white. I mean, he slams knight e4. He has very obvious compensation, but it's this would have given black like a sort of okay position. But that's an incredibly hard move to find. In any case, in the game, black played bishop e7. All right, calculate until 1-0, people. But be careful, because Andy missed something, and if you miss this too, you're going to have a bad day. But yeah, this can be calculated out until white wins. Avish, I think the variation is a little longer than that. Rohan, that's pretty cooperative from black. He's going to play a much better. So far, nobody's finding the testing way black can try. Andy, after black's last move, he has a much better move. James, you're just a rook down there. Austin, queens are coming off and you're in exchange down. So Rohan, you give the same line as Andy, but your black's last move of your line is a mistake. He has a better move, at which point you have to resign immediately. So Alice, that wins routinely, but black is going to play better than that. He has a better move on the first move of the variation. Yes, Rohan, that's correct. So we need to find something better than that. Andy, that's right, but you need to extend this line. There's more to it than that. Yeah, Aradia, that wins very easily, but okay. So a lot of people are giving me this line: Rook C7, Knight D6, Rook D6, and yeah, this is absolutely winning. Yeah, okay, but Sunak has it pretty close. So Sunak, you want to share with us? All right, so there we go.
So my move was Rook C7.
And what's your line?
Bishop D6 and Rook F7, Bishop C5, Rook D4.
Yeah, this Rook D4 move is incredibly important. If you play King F1, you're going to lose take and here and check. A couple people gave me this line all the way to King G4 and then King H3 or something, but there's Rook F4 here. So that's bad news. But Rook D4 just buys you enough time to save the game. So in the game, Niels took this way, but now there's just no discussion to be had because I get these pawns and this game's clearly finished. But the real question is, what if E takes D4? And this, ideally, you would see an advance. There's only one winning move here. But let's calculate it correctly and not just take guesses. There's only one winning move. It's not crazy hard, I don't think, but it's there. Yeah, Lyndon's got this. Alice, that's not right. So Wagner, you want to share with us? You haven't heard. We haven't heard from you yet. All right, so.
Yeah, I was thinking Rook C7. Basically, if like pawn takes and you just take the bishop, or
yeah. What if D3?
Queen E6.
And this is check.
That's check. Sorry. But like Rook takes bishop.
D2.
Queen E6.
I think Rook D5 is easy enough, but yeah, Queen E6 is fine. I'm trying to remember, there was some goofy line. I'm trying to remember how it goes, but yeah, this is this Rook C7 is the only winning move, if I recall. I don't think there's another one, because if you play Queen E6, there's Rook D6. So I believe Rook C7 is the only winning move, and why I'm just trying to remember. There was some funky variation, but and then he's saying, no, Queen E6 is now with checkmate, so we have to take care of that. I'm trying to remember where this funny variation was here. Bishop C5, Rook D4, this is fine. Oh yeah, King takes F7 is also a move, but it's not working, there's check. And if King E8, there's Queen B5 taking everything. If King anywhere else, Knight H5 is mate. I'm just trying to remember how there's some line here, Rook C7. I don't know why I can't remember it, but anyhow. Yeah, we're going to call it quits here. In the game, Black took with the bishop on D4, but at this point, it's obviously over. With that in mind, I just want to open up for general Q&A for the last minute or two. I'm going to bail pretty much right when I stop getting paid. Sorry, guys, it's late at night here. But I'll open it up for a couple of Q&A just at the end. Anything you want, fire away. I haven't played an over-the-board tournament in 17 months, and I'm playing tomorrow. Any tips not to be rusty? I think the best tip I can give you is to get in a time machine and be training really well in these 17 months, unless you If you weren't. If you have been, I don't think there's too much to worry about. I played my first tournament in 16 months last week, and I played really great. I think it didn't feel like it had been a year off. It felt like it had just been yesterday. And I think a big part of that is I was just keeping up my normal training. At this point, there's probably not much you can do if you're playing tomorrow, but just go and try to enjoy yourself, and just stay focused and healthy and energized and stuff like that. I'm playing an online tournament with really low players, so I don't want to go under time pressure. Any tips? Yeah, online, for me, I never get into time pressure online because I just can't manage to take the games very seriously. But just understand that you don't need to know everything, that you can make moves intuitively and not calculate everything to completion. Plus, most online games are very fast. How many times have you won against the Scandinavian? I don't know. However many times I've played against the Scandinavian, that would be right. What do you play against the Grunfeld? I have no idea. I've tried everything, but this game was Bishop C4, and that was the last time I faced it, and I thought it went pretty well. Am I playing the World Open? No. I'm long since done with CCA tournaments. I'm just hanging out in Prague for a couple weeks before the World Cup. Do I enjoy dry strategic games? Not particularly, but I enjoy winning, and if I believe that's the best way to play a position to win, I'm going to do it. If I believe that's the best way to play against a certain opponent, I'm going to do it. But I try to be well-rounded in general, and I don't care so much about enjoyment of what kind of position. I get enjoyment from winning. All right, last one. What should you eat in a chess tournament? I would recommend eating between 90 minutes and 120 minutes before your games. If you're playing some like 2-game-a-day tournament in the US, that's often very hard to do. But I would try to eat something that's between like 500 and 700 calories before your games, and no really fatty foods or really heavy stuff, nothing with too much sugar. I would avoid anything like Mexican or Asian, which is something it took me a long time to figure out because those are my two favorite cuisines, and I just wouldn't touch them before a game. That'll make you tired. Of course, everybody has different bodies and different things that work well with them, but things I would recommend would be like fruit, like non-fat Greek yogurt, low-sugar granola. These are things that I will frequently eat before my games. And then I'll usually have a big meal for dinner because, after it's over, I'm often very hungry. During the game, I would suggest bringing like a low sugar energy bar or a banana or something like that. I'm constantly sitting with bananas at my games. So that would be my brilliant Grandmaster diet. But keep in mind, I'm a very good chess player, but I'm not a licensed dietitian. So that it works for me, but what works for me might not work for someone else. And I'm not a doctor. I'm just someone who knows what works for me. All right, let's call it there. It's now 1:02 in the morning. It was lovely to see all you guys again, and have a good rest of your day.